People keep saying you can't buy a property with a VA home loan as is. Well, guess what? I'm going to break down how you can. It's probably the top myth amongst the real estate community and veterans alike, because no matter who I talk to, they always let me know that you can't buy as is, and they're having a hard time finding a property to buy. So I'm going to break down three basically categories of what you can do, right? We're going to go through understanding what an as-is purchase is. We're going to talk about the minimum property requirements set by the VA. And then we're going to also talk about escrow holdbacks, right? Basically how to be able to fix that. And there's definitely a lot of stuff in between that you're going to learn. So when a property, let me first just start off saying that, look, properties oftentimes are listed as is because it is a seller's market. They don't want to do any work to the property. Now that's good or bad, right? You have a contingency in your contract when you make an offer on a property. Do you want to waive like a home inspection contingency, which we're going to touch on here in a little bit. But there's a lot of factors that go into that, right? And you don't want to be buying a house that's also going to be falling apart, right? That's kind of a little bit separate from the actual VA home loan appraisal process, because that's where a lot of this is going to apply. So you can all day long purchase an as-is property, but it's going to really come down to that final condition of it, and does it meet the VA standard? Because it's definitely different than a home inspection, okay? A home inspection is where a licensed contractor comes out, they do 4 hours at the property, they do a 30-page detailed report, and they basically give that to you. You're going to freak out and be like, why is everything wrong with it? It's normal almost on any property, even in new construction. So an appraiser, when they go out, they're basically looking at the VA's requirements, and they just do kind of a glance over. They're not, taking things apart to kind of see what it is, right? That's why they have those minimum property requirements. And for sellers, it used to be really, in a way, VA loans may not seem as competitive because they have this additional layer of requirements. And so sometimes sellers will be like, well, we're not going to, we don't want to do these repairs. We're selling as is. But the veteran actually does have the ability to set up an escrow account to be able to hold that, to hold whatever repairs are needed to be done and pay for it themselves, which I'm going to explain a little bit later. But it definitely exists, and you're able to do that. And that's why also conventional loans are preferred because they really don't have any requirements like that. So a lot of times people coming in, purchasing a property, they're looking for those conventional loans because they're not going to have these additional layers. But again, you're going to be able to go around that. So let's touch on what the actual minimum property requirements are. And I'm going to also drop a link in the description. It's chapter 12 of the VA handbook. And again, a lot of the stuff I talk about is public information. It's more of how you craft that, and with experience, how do you pull all that. So the reason the VA has minimum property requirements, it's because it wants to protect the interest of veterans. You already know that's something right there. Lenders, servicers, and the VA. Now, listen, they're providing a lot of times 100% financing for veterans. So when you're purchasing a property at 100%, you definitely want to have some requirements so that in the event something happens to that veteran, they foreclose on the property, they don't want to dump more money into it in order to sell it, right? But still, it is a form of protection because, again, you don't want to be purchasing a property that is going to have so many issues that you're going to go into foreclosure anyways. Now, the list is pretty extensive on what they look at, but I'm going to touch on a couple things that I think are important. They're going to talk about in the minimum property requirements in the handbook. They're going to talk about roofs, attics. You need to have drinking. Especially if you're on a well, you need to get a water test. So they're going to have standards for that. Basements, swimming pools, termite inspections. So those are some of the common ones. But again, the list goes a little bit further. With that, okay? Now, some examples of the concerns that people have. I'd say the number one thing that people on the sell side will ask is well, there's some peeling paint in the property. Is that going to be an issue? It's going to be. I'll just be honest. What happens is that properties before 1978, they could have lead-based paint, and that's what the VA is trying to avoid. If your home is built after 1978, you can actually request a waiver for that, and I'm going to touch on that in a little bit because it's also extremely easy to do. And a lot of veterans go through a lot of headache buying a property, and they don't even realize that they could just sign off on a piece of paper and voila. Normally that's how it works, and it happens. So railings, like going down the stairs, will be another concern that they have. And then does it meet value or not, right? So those are like kind of like the top three things. Rails. Peeling paint, number one. Hey, is it rails down the stairs? Again, those are super easy fixes. And then they talk about value. Now, value is a whole separate subject, which we're not going to dive into today, but just know that VA loans, as far as the appraisal process it goes for value purposes, it's better than a conventional. It's a lot looser, and they give you a lot of flexibility. So that's really never an issue. It's more of the condition of the property and what we're talking about right now. Now let's talk about waivers. So the way a waiver works, like I'll give you an example. The paint one is a good one because, again, a home is built after 1978. The appraiser will note that the property is subject to repairs. And so lender's gonna provide you the appraisal, you read through it and go, you know what? The house is, we're requesting, that's what you're gonna write out to the VA. We are requesting, or I am requesting as the veteran, that the paint condition be removed for this subject property address. Home was built after 1978, so no concerns of lead, and we're not concerned about it. Then you can submit that to the VA to actually waive that. The other thing that you can do is that if you have, let's say you're buying a property and it has a shed or has a barn on there, or even a garage that's detached from the property, you can ask the appraiser to omit the structure from the appraisal. Yes, you can do that. And so if there's a dilapidated barn, you can ask, hey, appraiser, I want in writing and you have to submit that to the VA. I want to omit the barn from the purposes of the appraisal. Now, no, if that barn brings a lot of value to the property, then you're not going to get that value. But most of the time they don't. Like barns and shed really don't, but garages do. So you do have to be careful with that. But that's something you can tackle up front. This is why it's so important to have the right team going into a transaction. Now, this is going to be from the agent and your realtor, because not all realtors actually allow for all this stuff. So it's kind of also crazy. We do on our site. So if you're interested, you can schedule a call with us below, and we work with agents across the country that can help you with that. Now let's talk about the last thing, which is the thing that is going to be the biggest game changer, is that recently, like the other year, it was last year, the VA publicly came out and said, look, veterans are getting hurt because they're not being as competitive in the purchase market because they're relying on sellers to do the repairs. But again, in a seller's market, if I could sell it to somebody else, why would I sell it to you and then I got to do a bunch of work and lose money, right? That's the thought of this. And so the VA basically said, look, veterans have the option of if the setting up what's called an escrow account for repairs. So if the appraiser goes out and says, you know what, these couple of things are not going to pass the process, and you submit a waiver, or you might not even submit a waiver because that can take a little bit to get back. You might just say, you know what, I just want to do the repairs myself, and they make sense to you, right? You want to do them. You're then able to ask the lender to do the holdback. Now, what you're going to need to do is get at least 2 bids for that work. The cool part, as a side note, is that you don't have to have that company end up doing it. You could do the work yourself, but you need to get at least 2 quotes to do that. That's typically what they require. And then lenders will, depending on how it's structured, they'll allow maybe up to 10, 15,000 max in repairs. Now, that's the highest I've seen, was 15 grand, but this is like a home that was built like 100 years ago. It was a 4-unit building. There was a lot of issues with it, but we still got through it all, and we're able to do it. At least the sell side was kind of impressed. They were like, man, I didn't believe that it can even be done. So those are things that you just kind of need to factor in and know that you can do them. So that escrow account is going to hold 150% of the estimated amount. So if it's $1,000 in repairs that need to happen, then you're going to hold $1,500 in the escrow account, and you got to fund that yourself. So also be aware of that. That's an additional cost to you. But again, you're competing against at times other loans, or you're buying the property truly as is, so you might run into some challenges, but this is a way to go around that. Especially, it's hard to find a home you like or find a home you love. If you have a significant other, they might also love it, and you're kind of doing whatever you got to do to make it work, right? You got to put the deal together, and this is kind of what allows you to be able to do that. Now, those repairs typically need to be done within 4 months. Now, there's exceptions if it's weather related, like if you're in the Midwest. Right now, it's actually warm, but normally it's freezing and snowing, and typically you can't do any type of painting or outside work to the property, so they'll let that go by. But again, this part with the escrow holdback is very lender specific, extremely lender specific. You need to ask your lender, do they allow escrow holdbacks? Yes, they do. What is the max that they allow? What is the process to do that? Can you submit waivers through them to the VA? And then the last thing I'll leave you with, the one thing that you cannot do escrow holdbacks for or request waivers for is when it's a safety issue. And I'll give you a good one we recently had. So somebody had a back porch. The porch was somewhat dilapidated. I'm not even gonna lie, but it was missing railing once you get to the top, so somebody could fall over. Well, they basically came back and said, like, well, listen, that's not going to work. So what we did is we did a combination of things. We did a escrow holdback for a repair of the deck, but then they at least put up a temporary rail, so it would satisfy the safety component. That's why you want to be able to, at least when you go to the property, already start identifying those things. Hey, lender, this is what's happening. This is what we foresee might happen. Look, there's times when we look at pictures and I'm like, oh man, this is going to be a nightmare. And it actually ends up everything clearing. And I'm thinking to myself, this is crazy. And then other times we look at a place and we're like, man, this is going to be flawless. And then the appraiser comes back with like all these different nitpicking things. So everyone's experience is different because each appraiser is going to be different. So please guys, hit the like and subscribe button. If you guys have questions, video ideas, drop them in the comment section so we can get more content out to the veteran community. I'll catch you guys soon.